happened to me in the fall of 1994, and I decided to share this story with you because it carries a profound message that everyone should be aware of. My name is Richard Miller, and I've been hauling freight across America's heartland for nearly 20 years. At 45, with countless miles under my belt, I thought I'd seen just about everything these roads had to offer, but I was wrong. That particular Tuesday in October started like clockwork. I was 3 days into a 6-day haul from Chicago to Los Angeles, carrying auto parts that some factory in California needed yesterday. The dispatcher had been riding my ass about making good time, but I never sacrificed safety for speed, not once in my career. My rig, Old Faithful, was my home away from home. Pictures of my sister's kids taped to the dashboard, a small St. Christopher medal hanging from the rear view, a gift from my mother when I first started driving. The cab smelled of coffee and the beef jerky I'd picked up at the last truck stop outside Oklahoma City. Breaker 19, this is Midnight Runner. Got a bear taking pictures at mile marker 142 eastbound. Watch your donkey, good buddies. The CB crackled with the familiar warning about speed traps. I keyed the mic. Appreciate the heads up, Midnight. This is Steel Horse, westbound and down. The autumn sun beat down on the Oklahoma plains, unusually warm for October. The air conditioning in Old Faithful was working overtime, barely keeping the cab cool. I'd been driving since dawn, and my eyes were starting to feel heavy. The white lines on the road hypnotized me into a comfortable rhythm. My thoughts drifted to the life I'd built, or rather the life I'd avoided building. No wife, no kids, just me and the endless road. My brother Tom was always asking when I'd settle down, get a real job where I could come home every night. But this was home to me. The changing landscapes, the freedom of the open road, the solitude that let me think. I'd seen families at rest stops, fathers trying to wrangle excited kids while mothers packed lunches or changed diapers. Sometimes I wondered what that life would be like, but then I'd climb back into my rig and feel that sense of belonging that only came when I was behind the wheel. Little did I know that in just a few miles, everything I thought about my life and my purpose would be turned upside down. That the road I'd traveled 100 times before was about to lead me somewhere I never expected. The road ahead curved gently around a small hill, and that's when I saw them. A small figure waving frantically on the shoulder. My first instinct was caution. In this business, you hear stories about highway robberies, setups where drivers stop to help only to find themselves staring down the barrel of a gun. But something about this scene felt different. As I drew closer, I could make out a woman, young, maybe late 20s, with what looked like children huddled behind her. My foot eased off the accelerator, and I squinted through the windshield to get a better look. That's when I saw the blood, a dark stain spreading down her right leg. Jesus Christ, I muttered, hitting the brakes harder than I intended. Old Faithful protested with a squeal of tires and the hiss of air brakes. I pulled onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of them, hazard lights blinking in the autumn sun. In my side mirror, I watched the woman hesitate, then gather the children, 3 of them, all small, and begin limping toward my truck. The smallest was barely more than a baby, couldn't have been older than 1, clinging to her hip. A little boy, around 4, clutched her hand, while an older girl, skinny with pigtails, carried a small backpack that looked too heavy for her 7-year-old frame. My hand hovered over the CB radio. I should call this in, get some proper help out here. But something in the woman's eyes when she looked up at my truck, a mixture of desperation and fear, made me pause. I climbed down from the cab, the heat hitting me like a physical wall after the air-conditioned interior. "Ma'am, you folks need help?" Up close, she looked even worse. Her face was pale beneath a light sunburn, dark circles under her eyes. The blood on her leg was coming from a nasty gash just above her knee. But what really got me was the way she positioned herself, slightly hunched, one arm always around the children, eyes darting to the road behind them. "Our car broke down a few miles back," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "We've been walking for hours. I tripped on some rocks." She gestured vaguely to her bleeding leg. The oldest girl stared up at me with solemn eyes. "Are you a knight?" she asked suddenly. "Mommy said we need to find a knight to help us." Something in my chest tightened at her words. The woman, their mother, gave a strained smile. "Emma has a big imagination." But I'd been on the road long enough to read between the lines, the nervous glances over her shoulder, the lack of luggage. The way the middle child, the little boy, flinched when I moved my hand too quickly. They weren't just stranded travelers, they were running from something, or someone. "Name's Richard," I said, making my decision. "Richard Miller. I've got a first aid kit in the truck. Let's take a look at that leg." As I led them to my truck, a voice in the back of my mind started screaming warnings. What the hell was I doing? I didn't know these people. This wasn't my problem. I had a schedule to keep, a delivery deadline that was already tight. "Ma'am, there's a rest stop about 15 miles up the road. I can give you folks a lift there, and they can call for proper help." I tried to sound reasonable, detached, professional. The woman, she still hadn't told me her name, looked at me with those haunted eyes. "Please," she whispered, so low I almost didn't catch it. "We just need to get further west, as far as possible." I opened the passenger door of the cab, revealing the cramped living space behind the seats. It wasn't meant for passengers, especially not children. "Look, I'm not supposed to take hitchhikers. Company policy. I could lose my job." The little boy clung to his mother's leg, hiding his face. The baby on her hip started fussing, making those pre-crying hiccups that always set my teeth on edge. "I understand," she said, straightening her shoulders despite the obvious pain in her leg. "We'll keep walking. Thank you anyway for stopping." She turned to go, and the oldest girl, Emma, looked back at me with an expression no 7-year-old should ever wear. Disappointment, yes, but also a weariness that belonged on someone 4 times her age. "Wait," I said, the word escaping before I could stop it. "Let me at least bandage that leg before you go." I retrieved the first aid kit from behind my seat, motioning for her to sit on the step of the cab. As I cleaned the wound, a deep gash that looked suspiciously like it came from broken glass, not rocks, I noticed bruises on her arm, finger-shaped marks that were turning a sickly yellow-green. "I'm Sarah," she finally offered, wincing as I applied antiseptic. "These are my children, Emma, Toby, and the little one is Lily." I nodded, focusing on the task at hand. "This needs stitches, Sarah. It'll have to wait." The CB radio crackled inside the cab, making her jump. "Steelhorse, you still out there? This is Roadrunner. Past your rig on the shoulder. Everything okay, buddy?" I looked at Sarah, at the children, at the empty road stretching behind us. Whatever they were running from, it was bad enough to have this woman walking miles in the scorching heat with 3 small children and a bleeding leg. "I've got a schedule," I said again, more to myself than to her. "Deadlines, responsibilities." Emma stepped forward, her small hand reaching out to touch my arm. "Please, Mr. Knight," she said solemnly, "the bad man will find us if we stay here." And just like that, my carefully constructed excuses crumbled. I'd spent 20 years driving past other people's problems, keeping to my own lane, literally and figuratively. But I couldn't drive past this one. "Get in," I said, my voice gruff to hide the emotion threatening to choke me. "But we're stopping at the next town to figure this out properly. I'm not just driving you into the sunset without knowing what I'm getting into." The first hour in the truck was silent, except for the baby's occasional babbling and the steady rumble of the engine. Sarah sat rigid in the passenger seat, the baby on her lap, while the 2 older children squeezed into the small space behind the seats. I kept glancing in the rearview, half expecting to see a car in pursuit. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" I finally asked as we crossed the Oklahoma-Texas border, "because that story about a broken-down car isn't washing." Sarah stared out the window for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the engine noise. "My husband, Jack, he He drinks. A lot. It wasn't always bad, but after he lost his job last year, she trailed off, absently stroking Lily's fine hair. Last night was the worst it's ever been. He threw a bottle at me when I tried to stop him from going after Toby for spilling his juice. The matter-of-fact way she described it made my stomach turn. I'd seen my share of domestic troubles growing up. My old man had a temper when he drank, but I'd never imagined being in the middle of someone else's nightmare. "You call the police?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "His brother is the deputy sheriff," she said with a bitter laugh. "Last time I tried, they had a beer together while his brother explained how I needed to be a better wife. We pulled into a truck stop just outside Amarillo as the sun was setting. I needed fuel, and the kids needed food and a bathroom break. As I filled the tank, an old-timer with a silver beard nodded at me from the next pump over. "That's quite a load you've got there, son," he said, gesturing towards Sarah and the children waiting by the convenience store entrance. "Just giving them a lift," I said defensively. The old man, his faded cap identified him as Hank, studied me with eyes that had clearly seen more than their share of highway miles. "Been driving these roads for 43 years, he said. "Seen all kinds of trouble, the kind that follows you and the kind you leave behind." I found myself telling him the bare bones of the situation. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. "You know what you're getting into?" he asked when I finished. "Man like that, he won't just let them go, especially not the kids." "I'm just taking them to the next big town," I insisted, "getting them somewhere safe, then continuing my route." Hank chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Son, the moment you hit those brakes, you became part of their story. No such thing as just giving someone a lift when they're running for their lives." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn business card. "My sister runs a women's shelter in Flagstaff. You get them there, she'll help sort things out. Legal-like." I stared at the card, reluctant to take it. Accepting it meant accepting responsibility beyond just a ride. "You know what separates the men who sleep sound at night from those who don't?" Hank asked, pushing the card into my hand. "It's not the trouble they avoided. It's the trouble they faced when they could have walked away." As I watched Sarah herding the children back toward the truck, Toby's small hand trustingly in hers, despite everything they'd been through, I knew Hank was right. I'd stopped being a bystander the moment I saw that blood on her leg. I tucked the card into my shirt pocket. "Flagstaff's a long way off my route," I said. Hank just smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Routes change, son. Life has a way of redrawing the map when you least expect it." We left the truck stop with full stomachs and a new tension in the air. I'd made my decision. Flagstaff it was, but that meant calling my dispatcher to explain the delay. I waited until Sarah had dozed off, the children finally quiet in the back, before making the call on my CB. "You're telling me you're going to be a day late on a priority shipment because you picked up hitchhikers?" My dispatcher, Jerry, had been with the company as long as I had, but he'd never been one for bending rules. "Miller, have you lost your damn mind?" "They're in trouble, Jerry. Real trouble." I kept my voice low, glancing at Sarah's sleeping form. "I can't just dump them at a bus station." "That's exactly what you should do. Call the cops. Let them handle it." "It's complicated." And I couldn't explain about the deputy sheriff brother, not without telling Sarah's whole story, which wasn't mine to share. Jerry's exasperated sigh crackled through the speaker. "You've never been late. Not once in 18 years. You know what that buys you? One pass. This is it, Miller. You get those parts to LA no later than Thursday night, or don't bother coming back to the depot." The line went dead. I replaced the handset, my knuckles white around the steering wheel. I'd just risked my livelihood, my entire way of life, for strangers. The realization should have terrified me, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. The New Mexico border loomed ahead, a literal and figurative crossing. Once we passed it, there would be no turning back. I was officially off route, off schedule, and possibly soon to be out of a job. "You called your boss?" Sarah's voice startled me. She wasn't asleep after all. "I heard." I'm sorry. Don't be, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I made my choice. Why? She asked, the simple question hanging between us. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. I thought about it as the miles rolled by, the desert landscape bathed in moonlight. Why, indeed? I'd spent my adult life avoiding entanglements, responsibilities beyond my next delivery. Yet here I was, risking everything for this woman and her children. My mother, I finally said. She was like you once. 3 kids, abusive husband. Nobody stopped to help her. I swallowed hard. She made it out eventually, but not before things happened that shouldn't have happened to any of us. Sarah reached across the cab, her hand briefly touching mine on the gear shift. I'm sorry. Ancient history, I lied. The memories were never as distant as I pretended. Get some rest. We've got a long drive ahead. And as we crossed into New Mexico, a battered pickup truck pulled onto the highway behind us. It kept pace, staying a few 100 yards back, headlights bright in my mirrors. Sarah, I said carefully, your husband, what does he drive? She turned, following my gaze to the rearview mirror. The color drained from her face. A blue Ford, older model. I couldn't make out the color in the darkness, but the silhouette matched. Could be nothing, I said, pressing down on the accelerator. Old Faithful responded with a deep rumble, picking up speed. The pickup matched our pace. It's him, she whispered, panic edging into her voice. It's Jack. How did he find us so fast? I didn't have an answer, but I had a sinking feeling it had something to do with that deputy sheriff brother. Small-town connections, roadside inquiries, a description of my distinctive rig. Wake the kids, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Get them buckled in tight. Things might get bumpy. We were fully committed now, racing through the New Mexico night with a madman on our tail. The first limia, the threshold, had been well and truly crossed. The pickup gained on us as the highway narrowed through a construction zone. I couldn't push Old Faithful any harder without risking a blowout or worse. Sarah had moved to the back, huddling with the children, whispering reassurances that sounded hollow even to my ears. Hold on, I warned as the truck behind us suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside. In the glow of my cab lights, I could see the driver, a stocky man with a day's growth of beard, his face contorted with rage. He swerved toward us, his truck scraping along Old Faithful's side with a screech of metal on metal. Jesus! I fought the wheel as we fishtailed slightly. The kids screamed in the back. Sarah, get on the CB, Channel 19. Call for help! She scrambled forward, grabbing the handset with shaking hands. Hello? Anyone? We need help on Highway 40, westbound. The radio crackled with static before a gruff voice responded. This is Big Sky. What's your situation? My husband is trying to run us off the road, Sarah's voice broke. We have children in the truck. What's your 20, Steelhorse? Another voice joined in, Roadrunner, the driver who'd spotted us earlier. Mile marker 23, just past Tucumcari, I replied, swerving to avoid another collision as Jack's pickup came at us again. Blue Ford pickup trying to force us off the road. Hang tight, I'm 10 minutes behind you. Got 2 more rigs with me now. Jack must have been monitoring the channel because he suddenly backed off, dropping behind us again. But he didn't leave, just followed at a distance, headlights boring into my mirrors like accusing eyes. He's still there, Sarah whispered, clutching Lily to her chest. The baby was wailing now, sensing the tension. We're coming up on a rest area, I said, making a split-second decision. I'm pulling in. There'll be people, witnesses. The rest area was dimly lit and nearly deserted, just 2 passenger cars and another semi. I pulled in close to the building, positioning Old Faithful so the passenger door faced the entrance. Get inside, I told Sarah. Find the attendant. Call 911. She hesitated. What about you? I'll keep him busy. I reached under my seat and pulled out the tire iron I kept there. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Go, now. Sarah gathered the children and made a dash for the building. I stepped down from the cab just as Jack's pickup screeched into the rest area. He was out of his vehicle before it fully stopped, charging toward me like a bull. "Where are they?" he bellowed. "Those are my kids." "Back off, buddy," I said, gripping the tire iron at my side. "Police are on their way." He laughed, an ugly sound. "In this county?" "Good luck with that." He took another step forward. I could smell the alcohol on him from 6 feet away. "You don't want to get involved in family business, trucker. This ain't your fight." "You made it my fight when you tried to run me off the road." The rest area attendant, a skinny kid who couldn't have been more than 20, emerged from the building, Sarah behind him. "Everything okay out here?" he called nervously. Jack's eyes locked on Sarah, and the hatred I saw there chilled me to the bone. "You think you can take my kids? My kids?" He lunged forward, but I stepped into his path. What happened next was a blur. Jack swung at me, his fist connecting with my jaw hard enough to make my teeth rattle. I stumbled back but managed to stay upright. Years of loading and unloading freight had given me strength, if not fighting skills. "Stop it!" Sarah screamed as Jack came at me again. This time I was ready, sidestepping his charge and bringing the tire iron down on his shoulder. Not full force, but enough to make him howl in pain. Headlights swept the parking lot as 2 semis pulled in, followed by a highway patrol car, its lights flashing. Jack saw them and hesitated, his eyes darting between me, Sarah, and the approaching officers. "This isn't over," he spat, backing toward his truck. "Those are my kids. Mine." The highway patrol officer, a stern-faced woman with her hand on her holster, approached cautiously. "What's going on here?" Before I could answer, Jack launched into a story about how I'd kidnapped his wife and children, how he was just trying to rescue them. It was convincing enough that the officer looked at me with sudden suspicion. But then Emma stepped forward, her small face set in determination. "He hurts my mommy," she said clearly. "He throws bottles and calls us bad names. He's the bad man." The officer's expression softened as she knelt to Emma's level. "Is that true, sweetheart?" Emma nodded solemnly, then pulled up her sleeve to reveal a fading bruise on her arm. "He did this when I spilled my milk." Something in the officer's eyes hardened as she stood and turned to Jack. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step over here with me." As the officer led Jack away, Roadrunner and another trucker I didn't recognize approached. "You okay, Steelhorse?" Roadrunner asked, eyeing my swelling jaw. "Been better," I admitted. "Thanks for the backup." "Brotherhood of the Road," the other trucker said simply. "We look out for our own." I hadn't felt like I belonged to any brotherhood in years, had deliberately kept myself apart. But standing there in that rest area, surrounded by allies who'd come when called, I felt a connection I'd been missing for longer than I cared to admit. The tests had come hard and fast, but we'd found allies when we needed them most, and the enemy, he wasn't going anywhere just yet, but for the moment, he was contained. The next few hours were a blur of statements and paperwork. The highway patrol officer, Sergeant Martinez, took our accounts of what happened. Jack was detained, but Sarah's fears about local connections proved valid when a call came in from the county where they lived. "They want to transfer jurisdiction," Martinez explained, her expression grim, claiming it's a domestic dispute that should be handled by their department. Sarah's face crumpled. "His brother," she whispered to me. "I told you." Martinez must have overheard because she pulled us aside, away from the other officers. "Listen," she said quietly. "I've seen this before. The system doesn't always work the way it should, especially in small towns where everyone knows everyone." "What can we do?" I asked, feeling helpless for the first time since this all began. "Keep moving," she advised. "Get to Arizona, different jurisdiction. I can hold him for 24 hours, maybe 48 if I push it, but after that..." She shrugged, the gesture saying everything words couldn't. "But that's..." I started to protest. "Not right, not fair." Martinez's smile was bitter. "Welcome to reality, Mr. Miller. Sometimes the only justice is the kind you make for yourself by getting as far away as possible." She slipped Sarah a card. "Women's Shelter in Flagstaff. They can help with restraining orders, custody arrangements, all of it. But you need to get there first." It was the same shelter Hank had mentioned. The coincidence felt like confirmation we were on the right path, however difficult. We left the rest area with a police escort to the New Mexico-Arizona border. The children were exhausted, traumatized by what they'd witnessed. Toby hadn't spoken a word since Jack's appearance, and even Emma's brave facade had crumbled once the immediate danger passed. "I'm sorry," Sarah said as we crossed into Arizona, the escort turning back at the state line. "I never meant to drag you into all this." "You didn't drag me anywhere," I replied, adjusting the rearview mirror to check on the sleeping children. "I chose this." The desert landscape stretched around us, vast and indifferent to human troubles. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. "What happens when we reach Flagstaff?" Sarah asked, the question I'd been avoiding since we left the rest area. "You get help. Legal help. Protection." I kept my eyes on the road. "Start over somewhere he can't find you." "And you?" I shrugged. "I deliver my cargo to L.A. Late, but delivered. Hope Jerry doesn't fire me." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. In just 24 hours, these people had become more important to me than I wanted to admit. The thought of dropping them off and driving away left a hollow feeling in my chest. "There's a diner up ahead," I said, spotting a sign. "We should stop, get some breakfast." "It's still a few hours to Flagstaff." The diner was a typical roadside establishment, vinyl booths, the smell of coffee and bacon, waitresses who called everyone Hon. We settled into a booth, the children still groggy from sleep. Lily, the baby, was the only one who seemed to have bounced back, babbling happily as Sarah settled her in a high chair. "What can I get you folks?" The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stood poised with her order pad. "Pancakes," Toby suddenly exclaimed, breaking his silence, "with syrup and butter." We all stared at him in surprise before breaking into relieved laughter. "Pancakes it is," I agreed, feeling some of the tension ease. As we ate, I noticed a man at the counter watching us. Something about his interest made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. When he got up to leave, he made a phone call from the payphone by the door, his eyes never leaving our table. "We need to go," I said quietly to Sarah. "Now." She didn't question me, just quickly gathered the children. I threw some bills on the table, enough to cover the meal and a generous tip, and hustled them out to the truck. "What is it?" Sarah asked as I started the engine, with more haste than usual. "Not sure," I admitted. "Just a feeling. That guy was watching us too closely." We pulled back onto the highway, and I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see a vehicle in pursuit. Nothing appeared, but the sense of foreboding remained. "Jack has friends," Sarah said, understanding dawning on her face. "Hunting buddies, drinking buddies. They're scattered all over these states." The cavern was closing in around us. Not a physical place, but the growing realization that this wasn't going to be as simple as reaching Flagstaff. Jack's reach was longer than we'd anticipated, his network more extensive. We were approaching the most dangerous part of our journey, where the path narrowed and the shadows deepened. "How much farther to Flagstaff?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with renewed fear. "About 2 hours," I replied, pushing Old Faithful as fast as I dared. "We'll make it." But even as I said the words, I spotted a police cruiser pulling onto the highway behind us, lights flashing. Not highway patrol this time, but a county sheriff's vehicle. "Hold on," I said grimly. "I think we're about to find out just how far Jack's influence reaches." The sheriff's cruiser gained on us quickly, siren now blaring. I had seconds to make a decision that would change all our lives. "If I stop, they might separate you from the kids," I said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Small-town justice, remember?" Sarah's face went pale. "What choice do we have?" I spotted an exit ahead, a service road that led to a tourist attraction, some kind of meteor crater. "Hold on tight." I swerved onto the exit at the last possible moment, the truck tilting alarmingly as we took the turn faster than 18 wheels should. The sheriff's cruiser overshot the exit, buying us precious minutes. "Richard, what are you doing?" Sarah clutched the dashboard, eyes wide with fear. "Buying time," I replied, navigating the narrow service road with more skill than I knew I possessed. "We need to get to Flagstaff, to people who can help. If that sheriff is Jack's friend, he'll take the children," she finished, understanding and terror mingling in her voice. The service road wound through scrubby desert terrain, eventually connecting to a smaller highway. I took it north, away from our original route, but still heading generally toward Flagstaff. In the side mirror, I could see the sheriff's cruiser reappearing in the distance, joined now by a second vehicle. "They're coming," Emma said from the back seat, her small voice steady despite everything. "The bad men are coming. We're not going to let them catch us," I promised, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. Old Faithful was built for endurance, not speed or maneuverability. The CB radio crackled to life. "Attention! The driver of the Peterbilt Semi, license plate Illinois, 724 XBN. This is Sheriff Dawson of Apache County. Pull over immediately." I ignored the command, focusing on the road ahead. We were entering more populated areas now, approaching the outskirts of Flagstaff. If we could just reach the city limits, maybe local police would intervene. "Steelhorse, this is Roadrunner. You got your ears on?" The familiar voice on the CB was like a lifeline. "Roadrunner, I've got company. Local sheriff trying to run us down." "Roger that. Got your 20. Help is on the way." I didn't know what kind of help he meant, but any ally was welcome at this point. The pursuing vehicles were gaining on us, the lead cruiser now close enough that I could see the driver's determined expression. "There!" Sarah suddenly pointed ahead. A roadblock had formed, but not police. 3 semis were parked across the highway, leaving just enough space for another truck to squeeze through, but not the pursuing vehicles. "Brotherhood of the Road," I murmured, recognizing Roadrunner's rig among them. I slowed just enough to navigate the gap between the trucks, scraping Old Faithful's sides in the process. Paint and metal were a small price to pay. As soon as we were through, the gap closed behind us, the drivers moving their rigs to form an impenetrable wall. "They're helping us," Toby said in wonder, looking back at the roadblock where the sheriff's cruisers were now stopped, officers gesturing angrily at the truck drivers. "Not for long," I cautioned. "That'll buy us maybe 15 minutes before they find another route around." We entered Flagstaff proper, the city streets a welcome change from the open highway. I navigated toward the address on the card Hank had given me, a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood. "We're here," I announced, pulling into the parking lot. "Sunrise Women's Shelter." But our ordeal wasn't over. As Sarah gathered the children, preparing to make a dash for the entrance, a blue pickup truck screeched into the lot, blocking our path. Jack stepped out, a hunting rifle in his hands. "How?" Sarah gasped. "He was in custody." "Small-town justice," I said grimly, reaching for the tire iron again. "Stay in the truck." Jack approached, the rifle not quite pointed at us, but held ready. "End of the line," he called. "Sarah, bring my kids out now and nobody gets hurt." I stepped down from the cab, placing myself between Jack and the truck door. "It's over, Jack. Let them go. This ain't your fight, trucker." His eyes were bloodshot, his movements erratic. He'd been drinking, making him even more dangerous. "Those are my kids. My family. Family doesn't hurt family," I said, taking a cautious step forward. "You know that's not right." "Don't you lecture me about right," he shouted, raising the rifle now. "You stole my wife, my children." "Nobody stole anything." I kept my voice calm, though my heart was hammering. "Sarah made a choice to protect her children from you." Something flickered in Jack's eyes, doubt maybe, or a moment of clarity, but it was quickly replaced by rage. "Last chance," he growled. "Step aside." Behind me I heard the truck door open. Sarah emerged, alone, her hands raised. "Jack," she said, her voice steadier than I would have believed possible. "Put the gun down. Get in the truck, Sarah. We're going home." "No." The single word hung in the air between them. "We're not going anywhere with you. Ever again." Jack's face contorted with fury. He raised the rifle higher, aiming now. "You don't get to say no to me." Time seemed to slow. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw Sarah's expression of resigned defiance, heard the children crying inside the truck. I lunged forward just as the shot rang out. Pain exploded in my shoulder as I collided with Jack, knocking him to the ground. The rifle skittered away across the asphalt. We grappled, his alcohol-fueled strength nearly matching my adrenaline and desperation. "You're nothing," he spat, landing a punch to my wounded shoulder that made stars explode behind my eyes. "A nobody, a man who drives other people's stuff around. You think you can save them?" Despite the pain, his words struck a deeper chord. A nobody. Wasn't that what I'd made myself? A man who deliberately avoided connections, who passed through life without leaving a mark. "I'm somebody to them," I gasped, finding strength I didn't know I had. I rolled, pinning him beneath me. "And that's enough." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Jack heard them too and fought harder, bucking and twisting beneath me. Blood soaked my shirt from the gunshot wound, my strength beginning to ebb. "Richard!" Sarah's voice seemed to come from far away. "Hold on!" The shelter doors had opened, women rushing out. Some went to Sarah and the children, ushering them inside. Others approached us cautiously. Jack took advantage of my momentary distraction, landing a blow that sent me sprawling. He scrambled for the rifle, fingers just brushing the barrel when another shot rang out. Jack froze, then slowly raised his hands. Behind him stood Sergeant Martinez, her service weapon trained steadily on his back. "Don't move," she ordered. "You're under arrest." As local police swarmed the scene, Martinez knelt beside me. "Ambulance is on the way." That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And a thin line between the two, I managed, the world starting to grey at the edges. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was Sarah's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she mouthed two words, "Thank you." I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell that's the same in every medical facility across America. My shoulder was immobilized, a dull throb beneath what I assumed were some pretty good painkillers. "He's awake," a small voice announced. Emma's face appeared in my field of vision, her solemn eyes studying me intently. "Mr. Knight, you slept for a really long time." "Emma, give him space." Sarah gently pulled her daughter back. She looked different, less haunted, though exhaustion still lined her face. "How are you feeling, Richard?" "Like I got shot." I croaked, my throat dry. "The kids okay?" "We're okay," Emma answered before her mother could. "The nice ladies gave us beds and toys. Toby got to play with Legos." Sarah handed me a cup of water with a straw. "The bullet went through your shoulder. Clean shot," they said. "No major damage, but you lost a lot of blood." I sipped the water gratefully. "Jack? In custody. Real custody this time." Her expression hardened. "Sergeant Martinez made sure of it. Attempted murder charges, plus everything else. His brother can't help him now." A doctor came in then, checking my vitals and explaining what I already knew. I'd been lucky. The bullet had missed anything vital. I'd need physical therapy, but I'd make a full recovery. "When can I drive again?" I asked, already thinking about my rig, my job. The doctor's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Not for at least 6 weeks, I'm afraid. No heavy lifting, no operating heavy machinery." The news hit harder than the bullet had. 6 weeks, my truck sitting idle, no income. And Jerry had already warned me. This was my one pass. After the doctor left, Sarah squeezed my hand. "I called your dispatcher," she admitted, "explained what happened." I groaned. "Jerry's probably already hired my replacement. Actually, he's sending someone to drive your truck back to the depot. Said to tell you that you're an idiot, but..." She smiled slightly. "A heroic one. Your job will be waiting when you're cleared to drive." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by confusion. "Jerry said that? The same Jerry who threatened to fire me yesterday? Apparently, your story made the local news. Heroic trucker saves family. The company's getting good publicity." I snorted. "So I'm useful to him again." "You're more than useful, Richard." Sarah's voice softened. "You saved our lives." A nurse entered, carrying a vase of flowers. "These just arrived for you, Mr. Miller." The card attached was signed by a dozen different truckers, Roadrunner, Big Sky, and others I'd spoken to, only briefly, on the CB. "Brotherhood of the Road," it read. "Get well soon." Something tightened in my chest that had nothing to do with my injury. For years, I'd convinced myself I preferred solitude, that connections were complications I didn't need. Yet here was evidence to the contrary. People who'd come through for me when it mattered. "The shelter's helping us relocate," Sarah said after a while. "New state, new identities. They have a program for cases like ours." "That's good," I said, though a strange emptiness opened up inside me at the thought of never seeing them again. "You'll be safe. We can't thank you enough," she continued, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What you did for us." "Anyone would have done the same," I mumbled, uncomfortable with gratitude I wasn't sure I deserved. "No," Emma said, with the absolute certainty only children possess. "Not anyone, only a real knight." A social worker came to collect them shortly after, explaining they needed to complete paperwork at the shelter. Sarah hesitated at the door. "We'll come back tomorrow," she promised, "if that's okay." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. After they left, I lay in the quiet room, contemplating the strange turn my life had taken. For 20 years, I'd been driving, always moving, never staying, avoiding the very connections that now filled my hospital room with flowers and cards. The greatest reward wasn't the recognition or even keeping my job. It was the realization that I wasn't the nobody Jack had accused me of being. I mattered to people, to Sarah and her children, to the truckers who'd formed that roadblock, even to gruff old Jerry who was saving my job. I'd spent my life running from attachments, convinced they would only bring pain like they had in my childhood. But in helping Sarah escape her nightmare, I'd somehow found my way out of my own. The next day brought more visitors. Sergeant Martinez with an official statement to sign, Roadrunner and 2 other truckers who'd been part of the roadblock, even the hospital chaplain who'd heard about the heroic trucker and wanted to offer prayers. But it was Sarah and the children I waited for most eagerly. They arrived in the afternoon, the kids clutching drawings they'd made for me. Toby's was a big red truck, with what looked like a cape flying behind it. Emma's was more detailed. A man standing between 3 small figures and what I assumed was meant to be Jack. "That's you, protecting us," she explained seriously. "I drew you bigger because you're brave." "These are great," I said, genuinely touched. "I'll keep them forever." Lily toddled over to the bed, arms raised in the universal signal of pick-me-up. Sarah intercepted her with a laugh. "Not yet, sweetie. Mr. Richard is still healing." "Richard," I corrected gently. "Just Richard." 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital with a sling, a prescription for pain medication, and strict instructions to take it easy. The question of where to go loomed large. My apartment in Chicago was 1,500 miles away, and I couldn't drive myself. "You're coming with us," Sarah announced when she arrived to pick me up, "at least until you're well enough to travel." "I can't impose," I began. "It's not an imposition," she cut me off. "The shelter has a transitional apartment they're letting us use until our relocation paperwork comes through. There's a spare room." I wanted to protest further, but the truth was I had nowhere else to go. My life had been the road for so long that I barely maintained my small apartment in Chicago. No close friends, no family nearby. The realization was sobering. The shelter's apartment was modest but comfortable, a 2-bedroom unit in a secure building with a playground visible from the windows. The children had already settled in, toys scattered across the living room floor. "It's not much," Sarah apologized, showing me to the small 2nd bedroom. "It's perfect," I assured her, setting down the duffel bag a nurse had helped me pack with the few belongings I'd had in the truck. "Thank you." The next few days established a routine. Sarah would take the children to therapy sessions at the shelter while I rested. In the afternoons, we'd sit in the small kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. Her childhood in Minnesota, my years on the road, books we'd read, places we'd seen. I learned she'd been an elementary school teacher before marrying Jack, that she loved classical music and hated cilantro. She discovered my secret fondness for paperback westerns and my inability to cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. The children adopted me as a combination of patient and playmate. Toby brought me his toy trucks for inspection, solemnly asking my professional opinion on their design. Emma read to me from her library books, her small finger tracing under each word. Even baby Lily seemed to sense I needed gentleness, patting my good arm with surprising delicacy. A week into this unexpected domestic arrangement, Sarah received news from the shelter's legal advocate. "They've found us a place," she said that evening after the children were asleep. "In Oregon, small coastal town. There's a teaching position open at the elementary school, and the shelter has a sister organization there that can help us get settled." "That's great," I said, ignoring the hollow feeling in my chest. "When do you leave?" 2 weeks. She twisted her hands in her lap. "Richard, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank me," I said automatically. "Anyone would have—" "Stop saying that," she interrupted, a flash of irritation breaking through her usual composure. "Not anyone would have done what you did. You risked your life for us. You took a bullet for my children." I looked away, uncomfortable with her gratitude and something else in her eyes I wasn't ready to name. "What will you do?" she asked after a moment. "When you're healed, go back to Chicago, I guess. Wait until I'm cleared to drive again." The prospect, once my entire life's focus, now seemed strangely empty. "And then?" "Back on the road." I shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at my healing shoulder. "It's what I do." Sarah studied me for a long moment. "Is it what you want to do? For the rest of your life?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in years, maybe decades. I'd fallen into trucking after leaving home at 18, desperate to escape my father's house. The road had been freedom then, a way to keep moving, to outrun the memories. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "I never really thought about it." "Maybe it's time you did." She stood, gathering our empty coffee mugs. "We all have a chance to start over now, not just me and the kids." The next morning, I called Jerry from the shelter's office phone. After the expected lecture about my recklessness, he surprised me. "Company's offering you a different position," he said gruffly. "Training new drivers, based out of the Portland depot." "Portland? Oregon?" I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "That's the one. Figure with your experience, you could teach these rookies a thing or two. Plus, you'd be off the road. Give that shoulder time to heal properly." I thought about Sarah and the children, heading to a coastal town in the same state. Coincidence? Or something more deliberate? "Who suggested this position?" I asked suspiciously. Jerry chuckled. "Let's just say your story made an impression on some people in corporate. Plus that Martinez woman can be pretty persuasive when she wants to be." I thanked him, promised to think about it, and hung up. My mind was racing with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider before. That evening, as I helped Emma with a puzzle at the kitchen table, I found myself studying Sarah as she prepared dinner, Lily balanced on her hip. The easy domesticity of the scene struck me with unexpected force. This, a home, a family, belonging, was what I'd been driving away from all these years. "You're staring," Sarah noted, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Sorry," I said, embarrassed to be caught. "Just thinking. About the future." I took a deep breath. Jerry offered me a job in Portland, training new drivers. Her hands stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. "Portland?" "Yeah, not too far from where you'll be." I kept my tone casual, though my heart was racing. "Thought maybe I could check in on you folks now and then. Make sure you're settling in okay." Emma looked up from her puzzle, eyes bright with hope. "You'd come visit us?" "If that's okay with your mom," I hedged, suddenly uncertain. Sarah's expression was unreadable for a moment, before it softened into something that made my breath catch. I think we'd like that very much. The path back from the adventure was taking shape before me, not a return to my old life, but a journey towards something new, something I'd been running from for 20 years without realizing what I was missing. 2 weeks passed quickly. My shoulder healed enough for basic movement, and Sarah prepared the children for their new life in Oregon. The night before their departure, after the kids were asleep, we sat on the small balcony of the apartment. "I took the job in Portland," I told her. "Start next month after final medical clearance." Sarah's smile lit up her face. "I'm glad. I've been running my whole life," I admitted. "From my past, from connections, from anything that felt like putting down roots. And now I'm ready to stop running." I reached for her hand, our fingers intertwining naturally. That bullet did more than damage my shoulder, it woke me up. The next morning, I watched them board the bus that would take them to their new life. Emma hugged me fiercely, whispering, "Knights always find their way back to the people they save." 2 weeks, I promised. "I'll be there in 2 weeks." As the bus pulled away, I felt the final transformation complete. The man who had hit the brakes on Route 66 was gone. In his place stood someone new, someone who had found purpose beyond the endless road. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of a small blue house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Inside, laughter echoed as Toby showed off his school project. Sarah taught at the local elementary school now. Emma had joined the drama club. Lily was walking everywhere, getting into everything. And me, I trained new drivers 4 days a week in Portland. The other 3 days, I drove my pickup, not a semi, to this coastal town where I was slowly building a new life. "Penny for your thoughts," Sarah said, joining me on the porch. "Just thinking about how one decision changed everything, hitting those brakes on Route 66. She leaned against me, her head on my good shoulder. "You saved us." "And you saved me right back," I replied, kissing the top of her head. The wisdom I'd gained, the elixir I'd returned with, wasn't just about heroism or courage. It was the understanding that life isn't measured by the miles you travel, but by the connections you make along the way. Sometimes the most important journey is the one that brings you home. That day in 1994, when I saw a bleeding woman with 3 children on Route 66, I didn't just change their lives. I found my own. And that's the message I wanted to share with you. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't grand